But here's the deal. In real life narcissistic abuse, the revenge, the punishment, the justice rarely happens. More often than not, the narcissist just moves on. In the case of divorces, they continue to mess around with the court system and get their way. They waste time, they waste money to fight over tiny details and get away with it. They continue to antagonize their ex-partners even long after the children are grown up, and certainly when the children are minor children, and they bleed down bank accounts with lawyers' fees and create a sense of menace in their current partners or their ex-partners' lives as the divorce proceeds. Or the narcissist may then walk off into the sunset and marry their new partner, often probably not an age-appropriate partner, but their new partner, and make a new family and a new life after trashing your life. In the case of the workplace, the narcissists often win large settlements and NDAs are signed, and they get to continue going on to the next job and the next set of co-workers and do their damage in the next place there as well, because the NDA hides their story from the public. In the case of families, the narcissistic parent will continue to triangulate the family system and get away with it. Or the toxic sibling who never stepped in, never attempted to help out maybe parents who were struggling or anything, still walks away with an inheritance or another support. That's typically how it goes, and you know it. You know it. You've all been through it. Healing when there is justice in the case of narcissistic abuse is hard enough because the damage was real. The trauma was real. Those things happened and they impact you. But the brain is able to sort of work stuff through a little bit easier if there is an acceptable resolution. Basically, a resolution that for you at least feels just. Now, what is just to one person may not be just to another, but in general, just knowing that someone who engaged in narcissistic abuse faced some real consequences absolutely helps people heal. And in fact, if any of you had stories of justice, again, drop them in the comments because it would be so good for us to hear that some people had just stories. But let's talk about back though to when there is no justice. How the heck are you supposed to heal when there's no justice? A lifetime could be wasted wanting to get revenge on the narcissist, a vindictive hope that it will go south for them. If you get too lost in that kind of thinking, then keep in mind then you are still basically in the relationship and giving the narcissist too much valuable psychological real estate. And you may be missing out on your own life by ruminating about wanting something bad to happen to them. Now listen, it is normal to want vindication and justice, but it's bad for your mental health to remain stuck there. You know, in another video I said this, I have often said that the gold standard of narcissistic healing is indifference. The point at which you just don't care. And you are glad that the person is just no longer in your life. You're like, I don't care. I just do not care what happens to them. Okay? The legacies of narcissistic abuse, simply put, suck. There's very few good legacies. There are a few, but not a lot. After a narcissistic relationship, you are less trusting, more skittish, more cynical, more hypervigilant. You walk around feeling like you're not enough. You second guess yourself, even after years out of the relationship. And you still gaslight yourself. You talk yourself out of stuff, and you still need reassurance. All of that remains for a long time, even a lifetime. Now that said, remember what Viktor Frankl said. What is to give light must endure burning. You did the hard miles. You got burned. And you have emerged a survivor. And let's face it, survivors are always the most interesting people at the dinner party. Now, here's the ultimate issue. The narcissist still has to be them. They still have to walk around the world like that with their emptiness and their insecurity and their endless validation seeking and their need for admiration and their paranoid fears about the world and never feeling like anything that happens to them is enough. It's a joyless life. It sucks to be them. And perhaps them being stuck with their empty inner world, maybe that should be punishment enough, and that you don't need to participate in it anymore. So many people want to believe in a distorted version of karma, right? That good people will have good things happen to them and they ultimately win, and bad people ultimately lose. Listen, I was raised Hindu and I'm telling you that's not how karma works, okay? When it does, okay, when it does work out for you, it's all right to have a little schadenfreude and smile inwardly, but that's actually not karma, it's luck when the rotten things happen to the rotten person. Lots of narcissistic abusers are out there doing terrible damage to good people and walking out scot-free with no consequences. And on top of that, it really does seem like narcissists live longer than other people because they bring stress to other people's lives, but because everyone walks on eggshells around them and protects the narcissist from stress, the narcissists live a long time. Like I said, the injustices kind of never end when it comes to narcissistic relationships. Healing in the face of the injustice that most, and the injustice and the idea that most narcissistic abusers will never face anything that resembles justice. It's difficult to heal under those conditions, but it's not impossible. And a major shift for you is to frame it differently. Instead of seeing it as them never getting a consequence for their terrible actions, view it as you actually winning your freedom. Freedom from their invalidation, freedom from their devaluation, from their minimization, from their gaslighting, from their entitlement, from their dehumanization, and from their lack of empathy. That you can slowly step away from their silencing voices and their silencing souls, and also start working towards no longer personalizing the things that are their issues. It may look like they've just waltzed happily into the sunset, into their happy ending. It's important to remember that for those narcissists out there, there are actually no happy endings for them because nothing's ever enough for them. It's just pretty much their ending is just them holding out for their next new source of narcissistic supply. I'm convinced that we watch movies about narcissistic abusers who get their consequences because it's so satisfying, and it's often not how real life works. I'll give you an example. I remember watching Big Little Lies. Okay, if you haven't watched it, I'm going to spoil it, so you should watch it by now. It was a long time ago. And there were two really awful narcissistic abusers in the show, actually a mother and a son. In the show, they both face consequences in the end. One dies and one doesn't win their court case. It was so satisfying. I found myself cheering at the TV, but at the same time, I also watched it with a bit of sadness because I know that most survivors of narcissistic abuse don't get this just moment. And in fact, these moments are actually quite complicated for the survivors. So please recognize that the moment of justice is typically a Hollywood thing. Otherwise, there's no real easy way for them to end the story.